You're listening to the Bare Metal Cyber Prepcast, created to help you succeed in your educational journey. Learn more at baremetalcyber.com, where additional prepcasts, books, and training materials await. Let's get started. Silos are one of the most persistent barriers to agility, fragmenting value delivery through structural boundaries, conflicting incentives, and incompatible processes. Diagnosing silos begins with identifying symptoms such as long handoff queues, duplicate work across teams, or competing priorities that undermine shared goals. These surface issues often trace back to deeper causes like organizational charts that separate functions, reward systems that emphasize local efficiency, or tooling gaps that prevent visibility. For example, a team may deliver quickly within its own scope but wait weeks for approvals or testing from another department, erasing any efficiency gains. On the exam, silo diagnostic scenarios often test whether candidates can distinguish between surface symptoms and underlying structures. The agile response usually emphasizes that effective collaboration begins with understanding root causes, not just treating visible bottlenecks. Shared outcomes and vision reframe collaboration by aligning teams on customer value and strategic objectives. Instead of optimizing locally, such as maximizing the number of features one team delivers, organizations encourage alignment on results that matter across boundaries, such as customer satisfaction or retention. By articulating a shared vision, teams understand that success is collective. For instance, a group working on a mobile app may align around reducing onboarding time, with design, engineering, and compliance all contributing. This alignment reduces conflict because teams recognize their interdependence. On the exam, shared vision scenarios often test whether candidates can connect collaboration practices to outcome alignment. The agile response usually emphasizes shared goals as the antidote to silo-driven local optimization. When teams see themselves as contributors to a broader mission, silos begin to dissolve naturally. Cross-functional team design reduces silos by co-locating essential skills within the same group. Instead of passing work between specialized departments, teams combine design, development, testing, and operations into one unit capable of delivering end-to-end increments. This structure reduces handoffs, shortens feedback loops, and increases accountability. For example, a cross-functional product team can prototype, test, and release features within the same iteration, avoiding delays from external dependencies. Cross-functionality does not eliminate the need for expertise, but ensures that critical roles are embedded. On the exam, design scenarios often test whether candidates understand how cross-functional structures improve collaboration. The agile response usually emphasizes reducing dependencies by bringing skills together. Teams designed for breadth and integration are better equipped to learn quickly and deliver value sustainably. Interface mapping makes collaboration explicit by documenting where dependencies, data flows, and decision rights exist across groups. Without such maps, assumptions drive coordination, leading to overlooked gaps or duplicated work. For example, mapping might reveal that two teams both require access to the same customer database, but rely on different approval paths, creating hidden friction. Interface maps provide a shared understanding of boundaries and highlight where agreements or tooling must evolve. On the exam, interface mapping scenarios often test whether candidates can recognize the importance of transparency. The agile response usually emphasizes making dependencies visible, so collaboration targets real, not assumed, boundaries. By mapping interfaces, teams shift from reactive coordination to proactive design of collaboration pathways. Working agreements between teams stabilize cooperation by specifying intake methods, expectations, and service levels. These agreements prevent ambiguity and reduce friction. For example, two teams might agree that all cross-team requests must be logged in a shared backlog with explicit acceptance criteria, rather than arriving as last-minute interruptions. Service-level expectations clarify turnaround times, creating predictability. Without such agreements, teams operate at cross purposes, with mismatched assumptions about availability or priority. On the exam, Working agreement scenarios often test whether candidates understand the importance of formalizing cross-team norms. The agile response usually emphasizes agreements as living documents that adapt with experience. Collaboration thrives when expectations are explicit and shared, turning ad hoc negotiation into predictable partnership. Communities of practice help dissolve silos by connecting practitioners across teams who share expertise and roles. These communities provide space for exchanging patterns, mentoring peers, and evolving standards without imposing heavy governance. For example, a community of testers from multiple teams may align on automation frameworks and share reusable code, reducing duplication and divergence. Communities of practice encourage horizontal learning and identity, complementing vertical team alignment. On the exam, community scenarios often test whether candidates recognize their role in sustaining collaboration beyond team boundaries. The agile response usually emphasizes communities as lightweight, voluntary structures that spread innovation and consistency. They allow practitioners to feel part of a broader professional group while supporting organizational coherence. Liaison and ambassador roles intentionally carry context across boundaries. A liaison stays embedded in one team but participates in another's ceremonies to share knowledge. Ambassadors represent their team in cross-team coordination forums, ensuring perspectives are heard. For example, a product liaison might attend design sessions with a neighboring team to synchronize user interface decisions. These roles prevent misinterpretation and ensure nuance is not lost when information crosses boundaries. On the exam, liaison role scenarios often test whether candidates can identify lightweight practices for bridging silos. The agile response usually emphasizes intentional context sharing. While formal roles cannot solve every silo, they provide connective tissue that builds empathy and trust across groups. Rotation and pairing programs embed people temporarily in neighboring teams to build empathy and share knowledge. A developer from one team might spend 2 weeks with another to understand their constraints in language. Pairing across boundaries enables first-hand learning that no documentation can substitute. These experiences humanize adjacent teams, reducing stereotypes and mistrust. For example, embedding engineers with operations staff may improve design choices by exposing real deployment challenges. On the exam, rotation scenarios often test whether candidates recognize practices that increase cross-boundary empathy. The agile response usually emphasizes the value of temporary immersion. Collaboration deepens when people understand each other's reality directly, creating shared language and respect. Shared backlogs and joint triage align sequencing when work spans teams. Instead of competing queues where each team prioritizes locally, a shared backlog ensures that items are ordered by collective value. Joint triage sessions provide transparency into trade-offs, ensuring alignment. For example, when 2 teams share a dependency, a joint backlog clarifies which feature takes precedence, avoiding duplicate effort or conflict. This alignment reduces wasted work and delays. On the exam, backlog sharing scenarios often test whether candidates recognize the need for outcome-based prioritization. The agile response usually emphasizes transparency and shared responsibility. Collaboration improves when prioritization occurs collectively rather than through isolated, conflicting queues. Integration demos and reviews bring cross-team collaboration into focus by showcasing end-to-end slices of value. Instead of each team demonstrating only its own part, integration reviews allow stakeholders to see the product functioning holistically. This exposes cross-team issues early, such as mismatched interfaces or inconsistent user experiences. For example, a joint demo of a checkout flow may reveal that one team's payment service and another's user interface do not align. On the exam, integration scenarios often test whether candidates understand the value of demonstrating system behavior rather than isolated parts. The agile response usually emphasizes that collaboration is validated when increments work together. Integration demos transform silos into shared accountability for outcomes. Common vocabulary and definitions reduce translation errors that undermine collaboration. Terms like ready, done, or priority must mean the same thing across groups. Without shared definitions, teams misinterpret expectations, causing rework and frustration. For example, if done means unit tested to one team and deployed to production for another, integration delays are inevitable. Establishing common terms ensures alignment and transparency. On the exam, vocabulary scenarios often test whether candidates recognize the role of shared language. The agile response usually emphasizes explicit definitions. Collaboration depends on mutual understanding, and shared vocabulary prevents teams from drifting into parallel but incompatible interpretations. Decision-making frameworks clarify how cross-boundary choices are resolved. These frameworks specify whether decisions are made by consult, consent, or delegation, reducing churn. For example, architectural choices may require consent across multiple teams, while backlog priorities may be delegated to a product council. Clear frameworks prevent delays when opinions diverge. On the exam, decision framework scenarios often test whether candidates can identify practices that speed resolution without chaos. The agile response usually emphasizes explicit decision rules for cross-team contexts. Collaboration thrives when decision pathways are transparent, reducing the uncertainty and frustration of endless debates. Incentive alignment shifts rewards from volume of local output to shared outcome measures. Siloed incentives, such as rewarding one department for lines of code written, encourage competition rather than collaboration. Shifting to measures like customer satisfaction, cycle time stability, or end-to-end throughput encourages teams to pull together. For example, rewarding both design and engineering for improved conversion rates creates shared purpose. On the exam, incentive scenarios often test whether candidates recognize the cultural levers of collaboration. The agile response usually emphasizes outcome-based incentives. Collaboration strengthens when rewards reinforce collective goals rather than fueling local optimization that fragments value delivery. Minimal viable governance provides lightweight policies and escalation paths that enable autonomy while resolving issues that exceed a single team's scope. For instance, teams may operate independently but escalate systemic risks through a lightweight steering forum. This governance prevents silos from hardening without imposing bureaucracy. On the exam, governance scenarios often test whether candidates understand how to balance autonomy with alignment. The agile response usually emphasizes proportionate oversight that preserves flexibility. Collaboration requires freedom to adapt locally, but also clear paths for resolving broader conflicts. Minimal governance provides just enough structure to prevent fragmentation while keeping agility intact. For more cyber-related content and books, please check out cyberauthor.me. Also, there are other prepcasts on cybersecurity and more at baremetalcyber.com. Value stream visualization gives organizations a powerful tool to see how work truly flows across silos. By mapping the end-to-end journey from idea to delivery, teams can identify where work sits idle, where rework accumulates, and where efforts splinter into disconnected tracks. For example, a value stream map may reveal that most delays occur not in development, but in waiting for approvals or data access. This visibility guides collaboration investments toward the parts of the flow with the most leverage, rather than dispersing effort randomly. On the exam, value stream scenarios often test whether candidates can connect flow transparency to collaboration improvement. The agile response usually emphasizes mapping as a foundation for aligning teams on shared outcomes. When the whole system is visible, silos lose their power to hide inefficiencies or fragment responsibility. Synchronization cadences allow independent teams to coordinate without being forced into identical rhythms. Teams may plan, review, and integrate at predictable touchpoints even if their internal cadences differ. For example, 3 teams may each work on different sprint cycles but synchronize monthly for joint reviews and integration checks. These cadences prevent divergence while preserving local autonomy. Without them, dependencies accumulate unseen, surfacing only at release. On the exam, Cadence scenarios often test whether candidates can balance synchronization with flexibility. The agile response usually emphasizes lightweight, predictable rhythms that enable collaboration without bureaucracy. Synchronization is not about enforcing uniformity. It is about ensuring that interdependent teams meet often enough to stay aligned on goals and delivery. Dependency management is essential for preventing hidden blockers and late surprises. Practices such as visible dependency boards, early integration spikes, and aging alerts bring risks into the open. For example, a dependency board might show that 3 teams rely on a single database change, highlighting the need for early coordination. Integration spikes allow technical feasibility to be tested before full investment. Aging alerts flag work that sits blocked too long, prompting escalation. On the exam, dependency scenarios often test whether candidates can connect visibility to predictability. The agile response usually emphasizes making dependencies explicit and acting early. Dependencies cannot always be eliminated, but they can be managed so they do not undermine flow or create cascading delays at critical moments. API and contract clarity reduces silo-driven failures by standardizing technical interfaces and expectations. Clear contracts allow teams to evolve independently without fear of breaking each other. For example, 2 teams may work on separate services, but if they agree on an API contract with automated tests, they can release at different cadences without chaos. This technical clarity reinforces organizational autonomy while maintaining system integrity. On the exam, API scenarios often test whether candidates recognize how technical practices support collaboration. The agile response usually emphasizes contract-first design and automation. Collaboration improves when boundaries are explicit, tested, and reliable. APIs and service contracts are not only technical enablers, but also social agreements that reduce friction and misunderstanding across teams. Knowledge management replaces siloed hero memory with durable, shareable context. Practices such as searchable decision logs, accessible documentation, and recorded demos ensure that critical knowledge is not trapped in individual heads. For instance, recording integration demos allows absent stakeholders to catch up quickly, while shared repositories preserve rationale for key choices. Without these practices, collaboration falters when individuals leave or when memory proves unreliable. On the exam, knowledge management scenarios often test whether candidates can recognize the importance of durable records. The agile response usually emphasizes that documentation should be lightweight but accessible. Knowledge must flow across boundaries for collaboration to thrive. Making insights visible ensures that silos cannot hoard expertise or control information. Escalation and conflict resolution protocols shorten the time to decision when collaboration stalls. Teams should distinguish between issues that can be negotiated locally and those that require leadership support. For example, 2 teams may negotiate backlog priorities directly, but if their incentives fundamentally conflict, escalation may be necessary. Protocols prevent stalemates by clarifying when and how to seek support. Without them, disagreements linger, damaging trust and delaying delivery. On the exam, escalation scenarios often test whether candidates understand the importance of structured resolution. The agile response usually emphasizes transparency and speed. Collaboration is not free of conflict. It thrives when conflict is managed responsibly through agreed pathways that preserve autonomy while ensuring progress. Platform and enablement teams provide shared capabilities that reduce duplication while preserving autonomy. Instead of each product team building its own pipelines or monitoring tools, enablement teams create reusable services. For example, a centralized CI/CD pipeline supports multiple teams, freeing them to focus on product-specific work. These teams must balance offering shared capabilities with avoiding over-centralization that reintroduces silos. On the exam, platform team scenarios often test whether candidates can connect shared services to improved flow. The agile response usually emphasizes enabling, not controlling. Platform teams accelerate collaboration by providing tools and guardrails that make it easier for product teams to move quickly without fragmenting efforts or reinventing solutions. Vendor and partner collaboration extends anti-silo practices beyond organizational boundaries. Traditional contracts may reinforce silos by emphasizing fixed deliverables and rigid timelines. Agile adaptations encourage iterative delivery, frequent demonstrations, and transparent risk sharing. For example, a vendor contract may require delivering increments every 4 weeks, reviewed jointly with stakeholders. This approach aligns vendors with the organization's rhythm of learning and adaptation. On the exam, vendor scenarios often test whether candidates can identify practices that reduce external silos. The agile response usually emphasizes bringing partners into the feedback loop. True collaboration requires that vendors share ownership of outcomes rather than acting as detached suppliers. Contracts must enable, not obstruct, adaptive delivery. Remote collaboration norms intentionally design practices for distributed environments. Asynchronous updates, shared artifacts, and concise synchronous events prevent time zone gaps from hardening into silos. For example, asynchronous status updates captured in a shared tool allow global teams to stay informed without requiring late-night meetings. Short, focused synchronous sessions provide clarity without overwhelming calendars. These norms keep distributed groups aligned while respecting geography. On the exam, remote collaboration scenarios often test whether candidates can recognize the need for intentional practices. The agile response usually emphasizes clarity and inclusivity. Remote settings magnify silo risks. Deliberate design ensures that collaboration remains strong even without co-location. Security, privacy, and compliance teams must participate upstream in design and delivery conversations. When risk functions are invited late, they often become adversarial, forcing rework or blocking releases. By embedding these perspectives early, risks are surfaced collaboratively and addressed incrementally. For example, involving security staff in backlog refinement allows potential vulnerabilities to be addressed in user stories. This integration transforms compliance from a barrier into a partner. On the exam, compliance scenarios often test whether candidates can align governance with agility. The agile response usually emphasizes upstream collaboration with risk functions. Silos dissolve when compliance is embedded in delivery rather than separated from it. Metrics for collaboration must track system health rather than local throughput. Flow stability, cross-team defect rates, and time to decision reveal whether collaboration is effective. For example, if cycle times are stable but cross-team defects are rising, collaboration may be weak even if local metrics look strong. These measures prevent teams from optimizing in isolation. On the exam, metric scenarios often test whether candidates can select system-wide indicators. The agile response usually emphasizes outcomes that reflect collaboration, not vanity measures. Healthy collaboration is visible when flow improves across boundaries and decisions are made quickly without hidden churn. Metrics shine a light on whether silos are truly dissolving. Anti-silo storytelling spreads cultural reinforcement by highlighting successful cross-boundary wins. Stories of teams that overcame silos through shared backlogs, joint demos, or integrated compliance show others what is possible. For example, a case study of 2 departments that reduced defects by collaborating earlier on design reviews becomes a replicable exemplar. Storytelling shifts culture by celebrating real practices, not abstract ideals. On the exam, storytelling scenarios often test whether candidates recognize the power of narrative. The agile response usually emphasizes making collaboration visible through concrete examples. When teams see peers succeed by breaking silos, they are more likely to adopt similar practices, creating a cycle of cultural reinforcement. Continuous renewal of interfaces and agreements ensures that collaboration mechanisms evolve with context. As product scope expands, staff changes, or external pressures shift, old agreements may become outdated. Regularly reviewing and updating cross-team agreements prevents drift. For example, as a new vendor is onboarded, backlog triage agreements may need to expand to include them. Without renewal, collaboration structures calcify and lose relevance. On the exam, renewal scenarios often test whether candidates can recognize the need for adaptation. The agile response usually emphasizes reviewing agreements as part of improvement cadences. Collaboration thrives when mechanisms evolve alongside reality, preventing silos from re-emerging. Cultural reinforcement cements collaboration by recognizing behaviors that bridge gaps. Examples include context sharing, co-authored decisions, or joint debugging sessions. Publicly appreciating these behaviors signals that collaboration is valued, not just assumed. For instance, acknowledging two teams for jointly resolving an integration issue reinforces the norm. Culture change is fragile unless reinforced. On the exam, cultural scenarios often test whether candidates can link recognition to sustained collaboration. The agile response usually emphasizes that collaboration must be celebrated and rewarded. When organizations highlight collaborative behaviors, they shift incentives away from siloed heroics toward shared success, embedding collaboration as the default. In conclusion, breaking down organizational silos requires a blend of structural redesign, cultural reinforcement, and deliberate practices. Value stream visualization, synchronization cadences, and dependency management make boundaries transparent. APIs, contracts, and knowledge-sharing tools support technical and informational flow. Escalation protocols, platform teams, and vendor adaptations address organizational and external boundaries. Remote norms, compliance integration, and system-level metrics ensure inclusivity and alignment. Storytelling, renewal, and cultural reinforcement make collaboration durable. On the exam, candidates will be tested on their ability to connect collaboration practices to outcomes. In practice, silos dissolve when people, policies, and systems are reconnected around shared purpose, creating flow that accelerates end-to-end value delivery. Thanks for tuning in to the Bare Metal Cyber Prepcast, your trusted source for cybersecurity news and insights. Remember to subscribe at baremetalcyber.com so you never miss an update. And visit cyberauthor.me for best-selling cybersecurity books that equip you with expert knowledge. Until next time, stay secure and stay vigilant.